My name is Marina Collins, I'm 29, and during a dinner meant to celebrate my biggest career achievement, my own sister announced she was pregnant with my husband's child. Before I tell you how a forgotten legal document turned their victory into my $2 million liberation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. You know that feeling when you think you know the people closest to you? That deep-seated belief that no matter what problems you have, certain lines, sacred lines, would never be crossed? I lived my life by that belief. My name is Marina, and this is the story of how I learned that for some people, the only lines that exist are the ones they can exploit. It was a crisp Thursday in March, the kind of day in Austin where the air feels electric with possibility. That electricity was inside me, too. After 4 years of grinding, of late nights and sacrificed weekends as a project manager at a top tech firm, I had finally gotten the call. I was being promoted to commercial director. It wasn't just a new title, it was a 40% salary increase, a validation of every ounce of effort I had poured into my career. I couldn't stop smiling. The first people I had to share the news with were David, my husband of 4 years, and Beatrice, my younger sister. We have to celebrate. Terzo tonight, my treat, I said over the phone, my voice buzzing. Terzo was the kind of chic Italian restaurant where the wine list had its own table of contents. It was a place for milestones, and this was the biggest of my life. I wanted to share it with them. I arrived first, wearing a navy blue dress David always said made my eyes look like the ocean. I chose a quiet table in a secluded corner, away from the main bustle. I wanted this moment to be ours, intimate and special. The low hum of conversations from executives and elegant couples filled the room, a sound that used to intimidate me but now felt like the soundtrack to my success. I felt like I had finally arrived. Then I saw them walking in together, and a small, dissonant chord struck within me. Beatrice was practically glowing, a wide, triumphant smile plastered on her face that I hadn't seen in years. David, however, looked like a man walking to the gallows. He was fidgety, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding mine. He always got a little antsy in expensive places, a constant reminder of the income disparity between us, but this was different. This was a heavy, suffocating tension I couldn't name. Congratulations on the promotion, Mari. Beatrice enveloped me in a hug that felt both overly enthusiastic and strangely cold. She was never the affectionate type, especially not with me. Her warmth always seemed to have an agenda. To truly understand the depth of what was about to unfold, you have to understand the landscape of my life, the quiet, simmering resentments that had been brewing for 2 decades. Beatrice had spent her entire life living in my shadow, and it had curdled into a permanent, bitter envy. I was the responsible older sister, the one who got good grades without much fuss, the one who seemed to navigate life with a map she was born with. She was the youngest, the one our parents coddled and protected, but it was never enough for her. My successes were not seen as achievements to be celebrated, but as personal slights against her. When I won a full scholarship to the University of Texas, she'd muttered it was just rich girls' luck, conveniently ignoring the fact we were a middle-class family and I'd worked my tail off for it. When I graduated with honors and landed a coveted internship in Austin, she'd commented snidely that I always knew how to sell myself. Our parents, in their misguided attempt to be fair, only fueled the fire. They tried to balance things. When I bought my first reliable car with my own money, they bought a used one for her. When my salary began to climb, they increased the financial help they gave her to pay the rent on her small apartment in San Antonio. It was as if they were constantly trying to apologize for my success by keeping her artificially afloat, teaching her that she was entitled to the rewards without the work. I should have seen the danger in it, but I was too busy, too focused on my own path. I thought it was just sibling rivalry. I never imagined it was something far more sinister. I met David at a work party 5 years ago. He was a handsome, charming salesman at a BMW dealership, making a decent living, about $5,000 a month with commissions. It was nothing compared to my salary, which was already well into the 6 figures, but I didn't care about that. I fell in love with his easy smile, his ability to make me laugh after a grueling day. He was my escape, my calm harbor. Beatrice, of course, disapproved. He's not really your type, is he? She'd said, a subtle dig at the financial gap between us. Looking back, I see the tension was always there. Whenever we'd go out to a nice dinner, David would shift uncomfortably when the check came, a silent resentment flickering in his eyes as I'd place my credit card on the table. Beatrice would just watch, her eyes like a hawk's, calculating, observing. You basically support him, don't you? She once asked me when he was in the restroom. The question was laced with a venom I chose to ignore. We split things proportionally to our incomes, I'd snapped back, defensively. And we did. It worked for us. Or so I thought. The most critical piece of our past, the decision that would ultimately save me, happened 2 weeks before our wedding. I was 25 and had just closed on my first apartment, a modern 2-bedroom loft in downtown Austin that cost me $350,000. It was my first major asset, a tangible symbol of my independence and hard work. My lawyer at the time, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Williams, had strongly suggested a prenuptial agreement. Marina, you're young, you're successful, and you're accumulating assets at a rapid pace. A prenup isn't about mistrust, it's just intelligent financial planning. It's a seatbelt you hope you never have to use, she'd explained. When I brought it up with David, he actually laughed. A loud, dismissive laugh that made me feel small. A prenup? Isn't that rich people nonsense? We love each other, Mari. Love doesn't need a contract. He was so certain, so wrapped up in the romance of it all. We're going to be happy forever. You're being paranoid, baby. But I insisted. It was a non-negotiable for me. He finally relented, treating it like a silly indulgence to appease me. We went to the lawyer's office on a Thursday morning. I remember it vividly because David was hungover from a last bachelor's outing with his colleagues. He arrived 15 minutes late, smelling faintly of stale beer, and complained that he was missing a big sale because of this boring legal stuff. Dr. Williams explained the core terms with practice patients, complete separation of assets. Each spouse would maintain their individual property, both what they brought into the marriage and anything they acquired during it. No division of property in case of a divorce. 0. You understand what this means, David? I asked, seeing the vacant, impatient look on his face. Yeah. Each one keeps what's theirs, right? Makes sense, he mumbled, his pen already hovering over the signature line. He didn't read a single word of the 15 pages of dense legal text. He signed his name with a quick, careless flourish, as if he were signing for a package. He had no concept that he was signing away any claim to my present and future fortune. To him, it was just a piece of paper. To me, it was my armor. Back at Terzo, the waiter poured a $200 Chianti, and I launched into my news, the words tumbling out in my excitement. I talked about the new international projects I'd be leading, the team I'd be managing, the 40% salary increase that would push my monthly income to over $16,000. I was building an empire, and I wanted him, my husband, to be my king. But he wasn't listening. He was just fidgeting with his napkin, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Beatrice, however, was hanging on my every word, her eyes gleaming with an unnerving intensity. Actually, she cut me off mid-sentence, her voice dripping with a syrupy sweetness that made my skin crawl. We have some news to share, too. She reached across the table and took David's hand. My stomach plummeted. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, washed over me. This was it. The moment the world tilted on its axis. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The cheerful buzz of the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, it all faded into a distant, muffled roar. The lights seemed to dim. I could only stare at their entwined hands on the crisp white tablecloth, a grotesque parody of love and partnership. My sister's hand. My husband's hand. Pregnant. The words didn't compute. My brain felt like it had short-circuited, refusing to process the impossible reality in front of me. "I know it's a complicated situation," David finally choked out, his voice strained and weak. "But it happened. And we fell in love." They watched me then, a sickening, predatory expectation in their eyes. They were waiting for the breakdown. They wanted tears, screams, a dramatic scene that would validate their betrayal, that would cast me as the hysterical, scorned wife and them as the tragic, star-crossed lovers. But I couldn't give them the satisfaction. I felt a strange, icy calm descend over me, the kind of emotional shock that numbs you before the pain can set in. My body was there, but my mind had retreated to a safe, quiet place. "How long?" I managed to ask. My voice was a whisper, but it cut through the tension like a razor. "3 months, Beatrice replied, a smug little smile playing on her lips as her other hand instinctively went to her still flat stomach. "It started right after your birthday." My birthday. The party in December. The one I had meticulously planned and paid for, wanting to bring my family and friends together. While I was lighting candles on my cake, they were sneaking off, laughing at me, betraying me in my own home. 3 months of lies. 3 months of stolen glances I had been too blind to see. 3 months of them building their secret world on the ruins of mine. I felt a hot, sickening flush crawl up my neck. My hands, resting in my lap, clenched into fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. "Marina, say something," David pleaded, but there was no remorse in his voice, only relief. He looked like a man who had finally unburdened himself of a heavy secret, eager to move on. I finally looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a long time. The charming, easygoing man I had married was gone. In his place was a weak, hollow stranger, a man who had let my own sister poison his mind and heart. "What do you want me to say?" I wanted to scream. "Congratulations on destroying my life?" I stood up slowly, my movements feeling detached and robotic. My body was on autopilot. I reached into my purse, pulled out 2 crisp $50 bills, and laid them neatly on the table. More than enough for my share of the wine they had drunk while plotting my demise. "I'm going home," I said, my voice eerily steady. "You two can do whatever you want." I turned and walked towards the exit, my back straight, my head held high. I could feel the eyes of the entire restaurant on me. I heard David call my name, a desperate, pathetic sound, but I didn't turn around. I wouldn't give him that. In the large, ornate mirror on the restaurant wall, I caught a final glimpse of their reflection. They were still sitting at the table, bathed in the warm, romantic glow of the candlelight. And Beatrice was smiling. A triumphant, vicious smile. I drove home in a daze, the city lights of Austin blurring into a meaningless smear of color. The apartment, my apartment, was silent and cold. It was exactly as I had left it that morning, a perfect, orderly space that bore no resemblance to the chaos raging inside me. David's toothbrush was still in its holder in the bathroom. His favorite Dallas Cowboys mug was on the counter. It was surreal. How could your life be utterly demolished, yet all the physical objects remained exactly the same? I sank onto the beige leather sofa, still in my dress and heels, and just stared into the void. I should have been hysterical. I should have been throwing things, sobbing, calling my friends. Instead, I felt nothing. A profound, terrifying emptiness. My brain had shut down the emotion processing system. David didn't come home that night. Of course he didn't. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text. "I'm at B's house. We'll talk tomorrow. B." He called my sister B. The casual intimacy of it was like a physical blow. As if they were a cozy little couple, as if our 4 years of marriage were just an inconvenient obstacle that had finally been cleared from their path. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, my dress wrinkled, my makeup smeared. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my mother. Beatrice had wasted no time. She had already called our parents, spinning her romanticized version of the story, painting herself and David as tragic lovers who couldn't resist the cruel fate that had brought them together through me. When I finally answered, my mother's voice wasn't filled with sympathy for her betrayed daughter. It was filled with concern for Beatrice. "Marina, dear, I know you're hurt, but these things happen. David has always been a good boy, and Beatrice is pregnant. You're the strong one. Can't you think about the baby? Can't you be the bigger person? Think about the baby. The baby my sister was using as a human shield, a justification for her treachery. The baby she was using to try and steal my husband and, as I would soon discover, my entire life's work." "Mom," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I will not discuss this with you. David and I are getting a divorce. Period." I hung up before she could reply. That evening, David showed up, using his key to let himself into the apartment as if he still belonged there. He started packing a suitcase, all the while trying to offer pathetic, flimsy excuses. "It wasn't planned, Mari. It just happened." As if infidelity was a weather event, a tornado that had swept through our lives beyond anyone's control. Bea was going through a difficult time. She needed someone to talk to. He made it sound like he was performing a noble act of charity. While I was numbly gathering my financial documents to prepare for the inevitable divorce proceedings, I stumbled upon the green folder containing our marriage certificate. And tucked behind it, like a ghost from the past, was the sealed, official envelope from the Travis County Clerk's office. The prenuptial agreement. My heart gave a small, painful lurch. I had almost forgotten about it. As I began the grim task of preparing for the divorce, a small, nagging detail from a recent credit card statement kept bothering me. It was a joint card, but I was the one who paid the balance every month. There was a charge for a legal consultation, a firm I didn't recognize. Why would David need a lawyer? The question burrowed into my mind. That suspicion led me to do a deeper dive into our finances. That's when I decided to check our secondary savings account, an emergency fund I had set up years ago, an account he rarely, if ever, touched. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched in my throat. $15,000 was gone. It hadn't been a single withdrawal. It had been siphoned off in small, calculated increments over the past several months. 1,000 here, 500 there. Small enough to go unnoticed unless you were specifically looking. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I immediately called the bank and requested the security footage from the ATM withdrawals. The images they sent over were sickeningly clear, David, my husband, looking over his shoulder before pocketing my money. Again and again. That night, fueled by a cold, simmering rage I had never felt before, I went further. The legal fee was the key. I realized the consultation had been paid for online. I managed to access a cloud storage account linked to that credit card, an account David, in his arrogance, had obviously forgotten about. And there it was. The entire, sordid plan, laid out in black and white. It was worse than an affair. It was a conspiracy. There was a meticulously drafted business plan for a luxury car dealership, with David Ferrer and Beatrice Collins listed as co-owners. I scrolled down to the section on startup capital, and the words seemed to leap off the screen, burning themselves into my brain. Initial investment, Marina's divorce settlement, EST $300,000 plus. They had even attached emails exchanged with their lawyer, in which they confidently asserted that since there was no prenuptial agreement, they were entitled to half of everything. My apartment, my investments, my future earnings. They weren't just having an affair. They had been plotting to systematically dismantle my life and steal my fortune. The numbness I had been wrapped in for days finally shattered, and the pain that rushed in was so intense it almost brought me to my knees. I sat there, on the floor of my home office, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears streaming down my face. I felt a hollow, broken laugh escape my lips, a sound that scared even me. For a fleeting, desperate moment, I wanted to call my mom, to cry, to have someone tell me it would be okay. But then my eyes landed on the awards and certificates hanging on my wall, tangible proof of years of relentless hard work. I remembered the girl who had worked 3 jobs in college to graduate debt-free. The woman who had built this life from scratch, with no handouts, no shortcuts. And in that moment, the grief hardened into something else. Something cold, sharp, and unbreakable. Resolve. I would not be a victim in my own story. I picked up the phone and called Helena, my best friend and the sharpest family law attorney in Houston. I laid it all out, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. The affair, the pregnancy, the stolen $15,000, the business plan, and finally, the ace up my sleeve, the prenuptial agreement. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, Helena let out a low whistle. "Marina, my God. This is diabolical." "But that contract," she said, her voice shifting from sympathetic friend to formidable lawyer, "that contract is a work of legal art. It's ironclad. David has no right to absolutely anything. Not a single cent." A plan began to form in my mind, a cold and precise strategy for justice. "Helena, I want to do something," I said, my voice hard as steel. "I'm going to call them. I'm going to propose a civilized conversation about the divorce." "Marina, are you sure? It might be emotionally simpler to just let me handle it, file the papers, and be done with them," she warned. "I'm sure," I replied. They planned my public humiliation down to the last detail. They deserved to have their world crumble in the exact same setting. I waited a week. A long, agonizing week where I functioned on autopilot at work, a smiling, competent professional on the outside, while a storm of cold fury raged within. I let them bask in their perceived victory. Then, I made the call. Beatrice answered on the second ring, her voice cautious, but laced with an undercurrent of triumph. "Mari, so good that you called. We really need to talk," she began. "Hi, B," I said, forcing a light, breezy tone into my voice. "Look, I've had some time to think, and I think you guys are right. There's no point in holding grudges. We're adults. These things happen." The stunned silence on the other end was my first taste of satisfaction. "Really? You're okay with this?" she stammered, unable to hide her surprise. "I'm trying to be," I sighed, playing my part. "I mean, you fell in love, right? And now there's the baby to think about. The most important thing is to handle this divorce without a messy fight." "Wow, Mari. You can't imagine how relieved I am to hear you say that," she gushed, the relief in her voice palpable. "David was so worried you were going to make a scene, complicate the divorce, try to fight for custody of, well, you know." "Custody?" The audacity was breathtaking. "Not at all," I said smoothly. "Why don't we meet to talk civilly about how to resolve everything? Let's be adults about the finances. Maybe dinner again? Let's meet at Terzo, since that's where it all started. Saturday night." She agreed enthusiastically. The trap was set. The next few days, I prepared like a general planning a battle. I chose my armor, an elegant, severe black dress that conveyed power and control. I rehearsed my calm, resigned expression in the mirror until it was second nature. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my power. This was about justice. I arrived at Terzo on Saturday, punctually at 8 p.m. I requested the same table. The maitre d' gave me a look of faint recognition and pity. If only he knew. When David and Beatrice walked in, they were a different couple from the one I had seen before. They were relaxed, confident, holding hands like they were the king and queen of the world. They thought they were walking into a surrender negotiation where they held all the power. "Mari," Beatrice hugged me, her perfume cloying. "You look beautiful." "You both look well, too," I replied, my smile a perfect, polished mask. We ordered the same expensive Chianti. The irony was so thick you could taste it. After the first sip, David, now emboldened, leaned forward to get down to business. So, about the divorce, he began, his tone patronizingly gentle. We've spoken to a lawyer, just to understand the process. We want to propose doing everything amicably. We can sell the apartment and split the proceeds 50-50ths. The investments, too. And now with your new promotion, a little alimony will really help us get on our feet, especially with the baby coming. Our lawyer said it's standard procedure in a divorce like this. He said it all so casually, so matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of it was breathtaking. He truly believed he was entitled to half of my $600,000 net worth, plus a monthly check from my new, higher salary, all while he started a new life with my sister, funded by my labor. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, watching the smug confidence on their faces. Then, I slowly, deliberately, reached into my purse. They watched me, expecting me to pull out a pen to sign some preliminary agreement. Instead, I placed the courthouse envelope, yellowed slightly with age, on the center of the table. The sound it made hitting the polished wood was quiet, but it echoed in the sudden silence between us. Before we talk about division, I said, my voice dangerously soft, I think you need to show this to your lawyer. It's something important you both seem to have forgotten. David frowned, his eyes narrowing. What is that? Our prenuptial agreement, David. Remember? The one you signed 4 years ago, calling it rich people nonsense? The color drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. Beatrice looked from him to me, her smile faltering. What agreement? You made a prenuptial agreement? We did, I said, sliding the pages out of the envelope and spreading them open on the table like a death sentence. My finger tapped on the first key clause, the ink stark against the page. Complete separation of assets. Do you remember what that means, David? He grabbed the pages, his hands trembling so badly he could barely hold them. His eyes darted frantically over the lines of legal text he had so arrogantly dismissed years ago. Calm down, Mari, Beatrice said, her voice losing its confident edge, replaced by a tremor of panic. Even with an agreement, you were married. There's community property, division of assets acquired during the marriage. Your lawyer said that because you lied to him, I cut her off, my voice like ice. You told him there was no prenup. This one specifies complete separation of assets. I suggest you read Clause 2A. It's right here. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. The apartment was mine before the wedding. Every stock, every investment, was purchased with money from my salary. It's all mine. This can't be legal. David finally exploded, his voice cracking, rising in pitch. The apartment, the investments. I lived there. I contributed. You contributed a few $100s a month for groceries and gas, David. I paid the $1,800 mortgage, the condo fees, the utilities, the insurance. Your grocery money doesn't give you property rights over a $400,000 apartment that I bought with my own down payment before I even met you. Beatrice was now frantically flipping through the pages, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror, searching for a loophole, a lifeline that wasn't there. But alimony. He has a right to alimony. You earn so much more. I allowed myself a small, cold smile for the first time that night. Page 5, Section 3. Spousal Support Waiver. I suggest you read it aloud, Beatrice. She stared at the words, her lips moving silently. Both parties hereby waive any right to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance from the other party. David waived his right to any and all alimony when he signed this document. I didn't know what I was signing, he shouted, his voice now attracting stares from the neighboring tables. You tricked me. I tricked you? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. David, you were in the lawyer's office when she explained every single clause. You said you understood. You were just too arrogant and lazy to listen. There are witnesses. It's all registered at the courthouse. The reality finally crashed down on Beatrice. Her carefully constructed fantasy of a life of luxury, funded by me, was evaporating before her eyes. You mean, he has no right to anything? She whispered, her voice trembling. Nothing. Zero. Zilch, I confirmed, gathering the papers and neatly placing them back in the envelope. David leaves this marriage exactly as he entered it, with his financed pickup truck, his clothes, and his mountain of credit card debt. But, the baby, he stammered, sinking back into his chair, a broken man. I'm going to have a child to support. You are going to have a child to support, I emphasized, twisting the knife. On your car salesman's salary. Which, by the way, after the state of Texas takes its 20% for child support, is going to be incredibly tight. I then delivered the final, devastating blow. And we haven't even discussed the $15,000 you systematically stole from my savings account over the last 6 months. I have the bank footage, David. And I have a formal police report for felony theft. I was willing to overlook it if you walked away quietly. But since you brought lawyers into this, I guess we'll let the district attorney decide. The last vestiges of color drained from their faces. They were utterly, completely destroyed. They had come here for a coronation, and now they were facing financial ruin and possible criminal charges. I stood up, my movements calm and deliberate. I placed two $50 bills on the table once again. Your lawyers can contact mine. Her name is Helena Williams. She has all the necessary information, including the police report number. Marina, wait, David pleaded, scrambling to his feet. No, David. You waited. You waited months to tell me the truth. You waited for the perfect moment to humiliate me. You waited until you thought you had my entire future in your hands. Now, you can wait. You can wait to see what it's like to be poor. You can wait to see what it's like to count every penny. You can wait to see what it's like to not be able to afford dinner at a $200 restaurant. I looked at both of them, two pathetic, greedy figures in a fancy restaurant, their dreams turned to ash. Maybe now you'll finally understand why I work so hard to have what I have. And why I will always protect what's mine. I walked out of that restaurant for the second time. But this time, I wasn't numb. I wasn't broken. I felt light. I felt powerful. I felt free. The weeks that followed were an ugly, desperate storm. Beatrice, in a fit of impotent rage, orchestrated a pathetic retaliation campaign. Anonymous emails full of fabricated lies about me stealing company secrets were sent to my company's HR department. My car was keyed in the company parking lot, the word thief scratched deeply into the driver's side door. Beatrice even had the audacity to show up at my office, creating a scene in the lobby, screaming that I was a monster who was abandoning my family and my own niece. My mother, acting as her mouthpiece, called me daily, weeping, begging me to be the bigger person, to forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. But something fundamental inside me had shifted. The woman who would have once crumbled under that pressure was gone. I was no longer the family peacekeeper, the one who would sacrifice her own well-being for the comfort of others. I calmly and methodically documented every act of harassment. I forwarded the emails to Helena, who immediately had a cease and desist letter delivered by a courier. I gave the security footage of my car being vandalized to the police. I proactively met with my HR department, laid out the entire sordid story with documentation, the prenup, the bank statements, the restraining order I now had against both of them. My company, seeing the professionalism with which I handled the personal crisis, stood by me completely. The final, most painful step was drawing a permanent line in the sand with my parents. They came to my apartment, a last-ditch effort to appeal to my sense of duty. My mother cried. My father, for the first time, looked me in the eye and said, "Marina, she's your sister." "No, Dad," I said, my voice firm but filled with a profound sadness. "A sister doesn't do what she did. Family doesn't plot to destroy one of their own out of greed. You made your choice when you decided to enable her, to support her over me. I will always love you both, and I will help you if you ever need it. But I will not have a relationship with Beatrice or David. That part of my life is over. That is my boundary. Please, for the sake of what's left of our relationship, respect it." It was the hardest conversation of my life, but it was also the most necessary. The divorce was finalized in exactly 60 days. David, facing a felony charge, didn't contest a single thing. He signed the papers and vanished from my life. And with his signature, I closed that chapter forever. I poured all of my liberated energy into two things, my career and my own healing. The results were explosive. As commercial director, I shattered every sales target, earning the maximum performance bonus. My effective salary in some months topped $22,000. 6 months after the divorce, I sold the apartment that held so many painful memories for a significant profit. I then bought a stunning, 2-story loft in a converted warehouse downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a panoramic view of the Austin skyline. I spent a small fortune renovating it, turning it into my own personal sanctuary, a space that was entirely mine. That year, I traveled to Europe 3 times, Paris, Rome, Barcelona. First class, staying in the best hotels, all on my own. I discovered the joy of my own company. I started therapy with an incredible psychologist, Dr. Chen, who helped me unpack not just the betrayal, but the years of toxic family dynamics that had made me vulnerable to it. When, she asked me in one session, a question that hit me like a ton of bricks, "Was the last time someone took care of you?" I cried for 15 minutes. Meanwhile, through the reluctant family grapevine, I heard about David and Beatrice's new reality. It was a slow-motion car crash. David lost his job at the BMW dealership due to the bad economy and his own spiraling attitude. He eventually found work at a smaller, less reputable lot for half the pay. After their daughter, Sophia, was born, Beatrice struggled to find freelance work while caring for a newborn. The $800 a month in child support was automatically deducted from David's meager paycheck, leaving them with almost nothing. They couldn't afford their own place and had to move back in with my parents, creating a tense, crowded, and miserable household. Eventually, they scraped enough together to move into a rundown trailer park on the outskirts of San Antonio for $500 a month. My father, in a moment of weary honesty, told me they fought constantly, viciously, about money, each blaming the other for the miserable life they had created. Beatrice would occasionally send me long, rambling texts, alternating between begging for money and cursing me for my coldness. I read them, and then I blocked her number for good. 2 years after that night at Terzo, my life was unrecognizable. My net worth had surpassed the $2 million mark. I was promoted to executive director of my company with an annual salary of $300,000. And I met Daniel, a kind, brilliant, and successful architect who celebrated my ambition instead of being threatened by it. Our relationship was a partnership of equals, built on a foundation of mutual respect and admiration. But the most significant change wasn't financial or romantic. It was internal. I found a peace I had never known. I started a mentorship program for young women entering the tech industry, using my own story as a case study to teach them not just how to build a career, but how to protect themselves and their work with ironclad legal and financial boundaries. I was turning my deepest pain into my greatest purpose. On my 32nd birthday, 3 years after the betrayal, I hosted a lavish party in my beautiful loft, surrounded by true friends, colleagues, and Daniel, people who genuinely celebrated me for who I was. That night, as the party was winding down, I received a text from an unknown number. It was David. "Marina, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to say this. You were right. About everything. About me, about Beatrice, about the money. I was an idiot and I destroyed the best thing I ever had in my life. I hope you're happy. I read the message, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. Just a quiet, peaceful sense of closure. He had finally understood, but it was years too late. I had moved on so far that his apology was like a message from a distant star, its light only reaching me long after it had burned out. I deleted the message without responding. Looking back, that horrible, humiliating night at Terzo was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a brutal, painful gift. It forced me to see the truth, to set boundaries, and to discover a strength and a ruthlessness I never knew I possessed. They tried to take everything from me, but in the end, their greed and betrayal only set me free. My story isn't about revenge, it's about justice. It's about the profound realization that sometimes the best thing you can do is let people live with the consequences of their own choices, while you go on to build a life that is so full, so joyful, and so completely, unapologetically your own, that their memory fades into nothing more than a footnote in your own epic story. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it can help someone out there who might be feeling undervalued or betrayed. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone learning to protect their own peace? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more.